Hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying International Coaches Week with the CTI. My name is Charles Suasing, and I'm calling in from Toronto, Canada. I have been coaching for the last 10 years. I'm certified as a professional coactive coach. I got my certification back in 2019, and I hold a PCC with the ICF. I'm also a faculty member with CTI. As a coach, I have been working with emerging leaders, people who have been recently promoted into leadership positions, up to C-suite executives. I work across many different verticals and industries, including biotech, technology, education, healthcare, both private and public sector, government, just to name a few. Before becoming a coach, I spent 26 years, sorry, as a strategic consultant with a particular view on technology and how it applies to different businesses across Canada, the United States, as well as Europe. I'm trained in DEI, couples therapy, a variety of leadership modalities, and the Enneagram, and I'm certified as a leadership circle profile facilitator. I'm also the proud founder and lead facilitator for a men's group called For Men of Color. And this is a peer coaching group designed for men who identify as Black, Brown, Asian, Latino, etc. And we serve mostly men, both in Canada and the US. That program, I'm very proud to say, is in its just past its 2-year anniversary. I was asked by CTI to present something that was important to me, and not only important professionally, but important personally. So one of the things I've been pondering about in my work was the importance of context. And I reflected on my career as a man of color, as a Black man who spent mostly his time working in largely white-led spaces, how important context was for me. Um, as a Black man, I've experienced many types of bias around my race, my ethnicity, age, gender, experience, education, etc. And I realized that this had led to many of the challenges I experienced as a leader in how I interacted with my direct reports, my peer group, as well as managing up. And it also had an impact on how I interacted with some of my clients. What I realized or learned that I had to develop a front. I had to develop a persona that that I would think or would deem to be acceptable or professional in many of the contexts or situations that I found myself in. However, this caused me a great deal of anxiety, leading to many episodes of burnout and fatigue. It is when I allowed people to get to know me. Well, first of all, when I learned to accept who I was and to lead from that place, I was able to open myself up to allow others people to learn more about my lived experience and how I show up in the world. And this also afforded me to bring more of my authentic self to work and for people to experience my authenticity as I'm working. And what I'm sharing there is, I had to also reflect on everything that I have experienced in my life and put myself in my own context for me to come out as the leader I am today. I'm going to share with you a couple of stories and trust that I've changed names and some of the details and specifics to protect their identities as well as maintain confidentiality. But I've picked a few stories that I believe highlighted, for me, the importance of context. A couple of years ago, I was asked to work with Barb, who works for a government organization, a department in which she had worked for almost 10 years. And she came into this department straight out of college. She was recently promoted to a managing director position, and for the first time, I had to lead a team of people. I believe she had like 4 direct reports and about 20-25 people representing her larger team. This is the first time she had to manage a department mandate, um, and was accountable for that mandate to her boss. Her boss being a high-performing executive in her own right, with lots of experience in government. She carries a lot of weight and influence in government across different departments. Barb was recognized for her potential as a really effective leader, and I could see that from the get-go when we started working together. But seeing her potential, she was offered coaching as a part of her transition into her new role. As a part of her coaching, we executed a 360 leadership competency assessment. We also had a third-party consultant to debrief this 40-page report, which immediately overwhelmed Barb. Um, we all know as coaches how hard it is for a client to receive feedback. It tends to bring out all the worries and anxieties about how they show up. Many of the things that surfaced in her report showed or highlighted a lack of competence in some areas about leadership regarding motivation, delegation, managing work of others, stewarding, providing clear direction, and critical feedback. This immediately brought up some stuff for Barb and had her feeling disheartened, overwhelmed, and confused, because she's been working very hard over the last year or so in her leadership and believes that she's making some progress. In our following coaching sessions, I had to teach her that many of these tools is just interpreting the information that her herself and those who participate in the 360s are interpreting that data to identify areas for her development. But the study in itself doesn't have a lot of context to work with. So I reminded her that, she's only been in this role for maybe about a year and still probably adjusting to all the pressures that comes with managing a team and managing her mandate. So I invited her to see this feedback through that lens. Once we got grounded in her current context, the feedback made much more sense to her. She was able to receive the feedback and interpret that feedback in a way that she felt more empowered, more in her authority, and was able to choose which of the suggestions would serve her now in the present moment, as well as in her, in the long term of her career. So when I talk about context, I want to start with the definition itself. I'll share this with you. Context, coming from the Latin word con for together and tessere for weave. And what it means is the interrelationship or the interrelated conditions in which things exist or occur. Context, for me, as I understand it, is us bringing together the fuller picture of what's currently happening. It provides a frame of reference that includes all the conditions and that surround maybe an event or a person or a place or a thing, and grounds us in a way to interpret what's actually going on. Context for me is important because it provides us a fuller understanding of who our client is and how they experience their world. It creates an awareness or sensitivity for our client's identity, their culture, their environment, both at work or maybe outside of work, their lived experiences, their values, their beliefs. It also provides clarity around the client's specific workplace and experience, and maybe also including relevant challenges they're having as leaders. It helps us also to help our clients set realistic expectations and goals for the coaching. And it also provides guidance for us as coaches on how to customize the program in service of the client. I think one of the most important things when I talk about context, and particularly around the context for the client, it manages or minimizes our own internal biases, assumptions, judgments, prejudices that we make up as coaches, as human beings, as leaders about who we're working with. By establishing or evolving or deepening our understanding of who our client is through their context, we're more in that level 2, level 3. We're more in the presence of the client in service of them. I think it was last year, an HR leader from a healthcare facility here in Ontario reached out to me via email about a potential coaching engagement, which involved a department supervisor. She assured me in her message that he was open to having coaching and suggested that I arrange to have a fit conversation with him, which I quickly said yes. Manny was born and raised in Nigeria. He immigrated to Canada to attend university and chose to stay in Canada to start his career in social work and to have a family. Though he's proud of his Nigerian ancestral roots and culture and language and customs, he's very grateful for the opportunities being in Canada, what it has provided him in regards to employment, in community, and the resources it's given to his family and his wife and children. He's been with the same organization for at least 25 years, and has led a group primarily made up of women healthcare workers of a variety of identities and backgrounds. He takes great pride in what he has accomplished with them. And as their supervisor for a better part of 15 years, he considers them family to him. He has a great deal of respect for them, and he feels it's reciprocated, and respect it's reciprocated. In talking with him, I was totally enamored and intrigued by his array of stories about his experiences in Canada as an executive leader. He has an incredible sense of humor, kindness, and humility. But once we got into talking about why he was looking for coaching, his mood quickly changed to feelings of shame, sadness, grief, etc. And what he unpacked for me was that he very recently, received a performance improvement plan, or a PIP, from his HR leader. And that was due to an investigation regarding someone reporting inappropriate language and behavior from him. In all of his years as a professional, this was his first PIP ever. And it felt like he was being forced to take on coaching in order to save his job. The more we explored this, the more he shared about this, clearly he was distressed, overwhelmed, and anxious. I was sensing that something was off. So I followed up with his supervisor and his HR partner to understand more about again, building context of where we are and what we're talking about. Both of them, his supervisor and HR partner, both of them were middle-aged white women and were recent additions to the organization via a recent merger. There was a larger organization that bought this facility. Both of them have very limited experience, almost no rapport or knowledge of Manny. His experience or his involvement with his team. The woman who submitted the complaint that led to the investigation and eventually the PIP was also new to the team via the same merger. As we're also discussing this, I'm going back between Manny and the supervisor HR partner, and we had a few different meetings to get clear of what the outcome, the goal for the coaching was. As we're talking about this, another investigation by the same woman was opened, which led to another PIP. And that's got me curious about, okay, what's the aim here? You want coaching to support Manny, but you're also at the same time putting him under investigation for these interactions with the same individual. This had me sense into that there was much more at play that might be actually at odds for Manny's evolution, his growth as a leader, as an executive, and might have also put me at a disadvantage in which I wouldn't be able to serve Manny in the way that I would want to. So I had to have a candid conversation with everyone involved, including his supervisor and HR partner, that my concern that Manny was not being set up to succeed in this situation. And this might not be the right context for coaching. So unfortunately, I had to decline the engagement, but I did provide some support to Manny in regards to what steps he can take to move forward. So I wanted to share with you also, where do I look for context? And there are many places where we can look for context. One second here, I'm going to share something with you. Oops. My apologies. I'm managing everything myself here today, this morning. Where do we look for context? Of course, we're beginning with the individual that we're working with, the client. We can investigate or look into or inquire in their work history, in their goals and aspirations. We could look at life experiences from where they were born and raised, what culture were they born and raised in, their education, their training, what were their interests growing up, we can look at how they identify racially, ethnically, gender, sexual orientation. We can look at their physical, cognitive, psychological identities and challenges or competencies. We could look at what they see as important or as their priorities and values and beliefs. We'll look at their language and meaning of words. We could look at how they embody their culture. We can inquire about their, relationships both in and out of work. There's a lot of sources of information that can help us foster context around the client. And the more we can look into these places, the better picture we have of who we actually are working with. In many of my engagements, I love to build context from the get-go, get really clear and close and into, where they are now. When you think about, the current working arrangement or engagement, who they report to, who reports to them, what are their current challenges, obstacles, and issues? Really start to build a foundation for the coaching and not just jump into coaching. For me, why this is important, one is yes, I get a better picture of who I'm working with, but also creates a sense of intimacy, safety, and closeness with myself and the client. They begin to trust me because I'm really getting to witness now. When do I explore context? When do I bring context in? I'm always working on context. From the jump of the first chemistry call, the fit call, to designing my alliance and co-creating our coaching relationship, especially when it comes to debriefing assessments and feedback and pips from their HR partners. Because I do find a lot of these assessment tools and feedback need more color to provide more insight. Okay, where's that feedback coming from? And how should we interpret that feedback? Um, Context in regarding to uncovering maybe saboteurs or coping strategies or learning strategies that might be getting in the client's way. When there's an opportunity to evoke any new awareness or perspective. Context can be very helpful in career planning and goal setting and creating accountability. But one of the things that I think context really serves or really can be very powerful is when we're noticing that there's resistance or some kind of stuck energy in the coaching. Maybe a certain word triggered something. Maybe a particular question I've asked triggered something. Maybe something in the client has got them stuck in their saboteur and it's fiercely there, it's present, and we can't break through it. Establishing that context helps us, gives us that frame of reference on how to interpret what's actually really going on. And I'm reminded about this analogy around content versus context. You know, we think of content as what we're talking about. It's the what. It's the facts. It's the figures. It's the description of the current challenge. It's the information that the client is conveying to me or yourself as the coach. Context is how we are talking about the thing. It's listening again at that level 3. What's the energy here? What's the context? What's the orientation in which we're seeing this in regards to? Is there defensiveness? Are we reactive? Or there's a sense of argumentativeness kind of quality to this? Is there defensive or challenging or whatnot? Like there's a kind of like stuck way of seeing or a fixed perspective here that might not be enabling their growth. So we're looking at how are they talking about their experience. So I asked myself this question internally, and the question I leave is, okay, where are we talking and listening from right now? Where are we talking and listening from right now? Are we talking from a defensive place, a closed off place, a place of committed to being right? Are we talking from our saboteur, our limiting belief? Or are we talking from a place of curiosity, committed to our learning, growing, and expansion? And understanding where this energy might be coming from, whether it's closed off defensive or open and curious, we might want to explore, okay, what else is going on in here? What else is happening in here? What else is showing up here? Or what else is not being said? And that might also give us a gateway into exploring more about our client. Someone else came up to mind. This gentleman's name is Christopher, a Black man. He's a supervisor in a U.S. bank. He's in charge of IT support and leads mostly a remote team in charge of troubleshooting issues with a variety of platforms and technologies that kind of provide the backbone for the bank itself. When I met with Christopher, one, he was excited and not unsure about what coaching was or how it could serve him. But, you know, he was curious about what he can learn and what he can experience through coaching. So we started to explore some of the challenges that he's had or experienced as a leader. He talked about his relationships with his direct reports, and his larger team. He talked about his peer group, the people that he collaborates with across his organization. And he spoke about his supervisors and his executive directors. He got into the quality of the relationships and how we were able to communicate and interact, and some of the challenges that he's had with them, particularly about elevating his game and seeing where his career was going. Because he was feeling quite stuck and stagnant in his position, which he's held for a few years. But what was interesting was when he was speaking about his team, he was quite present, quite open. But when he started talking about his peer group and his senior executives, this anxiety started to show up. And what became evident was a stutter that he had. And the more and more he talked about his peer group and his leadership and his leading executives, the more he stuttered and the more apparent the stuttering got. So I asked him about what was going on for him. What was present to him? What was he experiencing within his body when he thought about his supervisor, for example? And he noticed this level of anxiety was starting to creep in and take him over. He knew what he wanted to share with me, but he knew that something was getting in the way. So we explored that a little bit, and he came to the conclusion, and he was wondering, maybe it's because I'm introverted. All right. Well, instead of projecting my understanding of introversion or the common understanding of introversion, I went to explore what introversion meant for him and his experience of being introverted. So he went on and started to share a variety of experiences from very early childhood to recent. He shared about his childhood being a part of a middle child of a large family, growing up in a rural part of South Carolina. Um, he talked about his experience in baseball and football and how he found himself mostly playing from the bench. When it came to school, just getting a passing grade was great. Um, and many a times as he's talking about it, you could feel him playing how he played small in so many areas of his life. Not a lot of enthusiasm, not a lot of passion, but just matter of fact. And so we turned back and explored, okay, where did he learn about being an introvert? And it was through his family, it was through his teachers, it was through his coaches. And they connected that, him being an introverted would limit his potential, would limit his opportunities, that he would have to work harder because he's introverted. And this idea of having, to work harder and to not be able to achieve his potential left him feeling inadequate, unworthy, anxious, sometimes depressed, and whatnot. So I saw this as an opportunity to further unpack his definition of being introverted. And so I invited him in and I asked him, can we unpack this word? Because apparently it had a lot of power on him. And as we were exploring this, we started to differentiate or discern the way he processed information from performance anxiety, from feeling inadequate and unworthy, from okay, well, his maybe his level of education and whatnot. And we started pulling all these pieces apart, and he realized as he's discovering these bits and pieces that he had collapsed all these meanings together and called it being introverted. But once we started to break it apart and he started to see these things and then see it in context of his experiences in life, he started to see, okay, yeah, he may process information differently, he may socialize differently, but the anxiety wasn't about being introverted at all. It was actually believing that this story existed. And as we're talking about these things and now putting it in context of his role as an executive, his stuttering almost disappeared. He became far more confident in his speech. He was able to ask for more what he wanted. He sought out mentors to guide him into where he wanted to drive his career. He started to create some audacious goals for himself. Once you start to see the bigger picture and see these components, like these things being pulled apart, and he was able to see them individually in the context of his life and his career, man, he started to show up differently. So I'm going to offer you this, right? When we're noticing that there's that quality that's in our clients in their way they're being that might be stuck, that might be confused, that might be disempowered and whatnot, by gathering more insight about the context in which they live, past, present, future, can help bring some insight to the client of how they're experiencing and seeing themselves. So ask yourself that question when that energy is in the room there, when that energy is at the level 3, ask yourself, ask your client that question. Where are we talking and listening from right now? Which context? Is it from a place of disempowerment? Is it a place of defensiveness, closed offness, standoffishness? Or is it a place from open, curious, expansive, possibility, creativity, resourcefulness, etc.? And I'll leave you this with this last inquiry, and this is for you to take home to yourself and reflect on you, is that in your own work, how could building more context improve your client's experience in coaching? And on that note, I'd say thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share some of my perspective around this. And by all means, reach out to me. I'm all over social media, etc. Reach out to me. I would love to hear your perspective about context in your own coaching and how you bring context into your coaching. So I'd like to thank you again. And I'd like to thank CTI for bringing me into this. And have a great day.